I learned sign language as a kid for fun. It's the only reason my family is still alive. Everyone thought I was wasting my life learning sign languages. They were wrong, but I didn't know that until I watched 3 armed men break into my parents' cabin through the security camera and realized I was the only person who could warn my family without making a sound. My name is Adrian Wolf, and for 23 years people told me my obsession with sign languages was pointless. Teachers said I should focus on real subjects. My ex-girlfriend left me because I spent more time practicing handshapes than holding hers. Even my own sister called it a party trick that would never matter in the real world. But last November, that party trick became the only thing standing between my family and 3 men who'd come to kill us. I'm getting ahead of myself though, because the story actually starts when I was 8 years old and stumbled across a documentary about deaf culture that changed everything. Not just American Sign Language, but the whole world of visual languages that most hearing people never even know exist. I became obsessed in the way only a lonely kid can become obsessed with something. I taught myself ASL first, then British Sign Language, Australian Sign Language, International Sign, even Japanese Sign Language from grainy videos I found in the darkest corners of the internet. By the time I was 15, I could hold conversations in 6 different sign languages, and I was learning the subtle regional dialects that made each one unique. My younger brother Isaac thought it was cool at first, would ask me to teach him swear words in ASL that he could use at school without teachers knowing. But even he lost interest after a few months and went back to football and normal teenage things. My older sister Melanie was less kind about it. She told me once at a family dinner that I was hiding behind my hands because I was too scared to actually speak and be heard. By 31, I was still practicing every single day. I'd wake up and run through fingerspelling drills while my coffee brewed. I'd watch international news with the sound off and practice signing the stories I saw. I built this entire life around languages that 99% of the population would never use or understand, and I couldn't really explain why, except that it felt like solving an infinite puzzle. My parents had stopped asking when I'd get a real career. I worked as a freelance graphic designer, made enough to pay my bills, and spent my free time in online signing communities where I was actually respected for my skills. Last November, my mom called and said the whole family was meeting at their cabin in the Cascade Mountains for Thanksgiving week. She said it in that tone that meant attendance wasn't optional, that this was about family unity and making memories. The cabin was 40 minutes from the nearest town on a dirt road that barely counted as maintained. My parents had bought it 15 years ago, and my dad had spent countless weekends turning it from a hunting shack into something almost livable. It had 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that smelled like pine and propane, and absolutely no cell phone signal for miles. My dad always said that was a feature, not a bug, that we needed to disconnect from technology and reconnect with each other. I drove up on Monday afternoon, 3 days before Thanksgiving, because my mom had asked me to come early and help prepare. The road was already icing over in patches, and I could see dark clouds building over the mountains that promised snow. Isaac and his fiancée Natasha arrived an hour after me, pulling up in his truck with enough supplies to survive a month instead of a week. Natasha was nice enough, a dental hygienist from Spokane, who smiled too much and called everyone Han in a way that felt forced. Isaac looked happy though, happier than I'd seen him in years. Melanie showed up Wednesday morning with her husband Douglas and their 2 kids, Lily, who was 9, and Owen, who was 7. The kids were loud and energetic in the way that made me immediately anxious about spending a week in close quarters with them, but Melanie seemed stressed in a way that went beyond normal parent exhaustion. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and she kept checking her phone even though there was no signal. That first night, we all sat around the fireplace, and my dad made his traditional speech about gratitude and family bonds and how lucky we were to have this time together. Everyone nodded and smiled, and I caught Melanie and Douglas exchanging a look that I couldn't quite read. Something was off about them, a tension that felt like more than just the usual married couple stress. I signed to Isaac in ASL, asking if he'd noticed anything weird about Melanie, and he signed back that she'd been distant for months, that Douglas had some kind of work trouble, but nobody would talk about details. My parents didn't notice our conversation because they'd never bothered learning to sign, which meant Isaac and I had been having silent discussions right in front of them for decades. I was the only one still awake at 2 in the morning when I heard the sound. Not loud, just wrong. A scraping noise from the back of the cabin that didn't match the wind or the settling of old wood. I stood up and walked quietly to the window, moving the curtain aside just enough to look out into the darkness. At first I didn't see anything except trees and shadows and the faint reflection of moonlight on snow. Then movement, 3 figures in dark clothing approaching the cabin from the tree line. They were moving carefully, coordinated, like people who'd done this before. My heart started hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat, because this wasn't random. Random burglars don't hike 40 minutes through frozen forest in the middle of the night to rob a cabin. These men knew we were here, and they'd come for a specific reason, and I had maybe 60 seconds to warn my family. Full story is linked below or on my channel.